5,000 years of selective breeding separates the golden retriever from the pit bull. 0.2% DNA differences, same as with us humans. Although us humans got less variation than dogs, this is still relevant and an important comparison. You can see the differences between a poodle and a pit bull. There is no arguing that they are different, despite their genetic similarities. And how and from what did you think these dogs separated from? From the wild wolves, in which they became separate species, or the various big cats, or little cats. They all come from the same place. Started with slight differences that grew over time, to the point where they became separate species. 60,000 years separates the Caucasian from the Negroid, and even more thousands of years separates Negroids from East Asians. 0.2% DNA difference. 78 genes separate men from women, and they are about 20,000 to 25,000 genomes, so these 78 genes differences translates into a total genetic difference between men and women of at most 4/10 of 1%. These small differences are enough to create biological, psychological, and phenotypical differences, just as sex is not a social construct. Neither is race. Human and chimpanzees share 98.77% of the genome, so the total crude genetic similarities based on gene location doesn't amount to a hill of beans, to quote Stools. We also share 20 to 30% of our genetic code with yeast and bacteria, 80% in common with birds, 90% with non-primate mammals such as pigs, cats, dogs, or even raccoons. The greatest differences between humans is the alleles. Allele distributions within the gene. One gene, the DTNBP1, accounts for a loss of 6.3 IQ points in Nigerians compared to the Europeans, compared to the haplomap analysis. Now, what this means is that the Nigerians with certain alleles within that gene did better than other Nigerians who had the deleterious communal alleles. Judging by the impact of alleles within the Nigerian population, they could be compared to European allele distribution within that gene, and the comparison between allele distribution showed that they account for 6.3 points. Both Europeans and Nigerians have this gene. Claims of the races being nearly identical have to do with gene locations, not with gene variants, not with alleles, which I explained in video 1. Alleles differences in the CHRM2 seem to account for 2 points from the Europeans and Mongoloids. What matters is the relevance of genes and, more importantly, the distribution of alleles within those genes, tendencies, probabilities, and this is really important due to regression to the mean, which means if there's a greater distribution of tall Scandinavian people, and children often regress to the mean of the population due to the fact that children tend to eventually reach a height that is between one's parents' height. If a mom is 170 centimeters and dad is 180 centimeters, there's a very great likelihood of you being 175 centimeters. Exceptions do occur, but these are the trends. People within races regress to the race's mean. Biology show that races are more than a social construct. Coroners in crime labs can identify race from skeleton, or even just the skull. We have different shapes on the skull. Race can be identified from blood, hair, semen. There are racial differences in the amount of applied medicine and the accessibility and the resistance to diseases, which I will touch upon on subject 6, why race matters. There are diseases and genetic disorders common to certain races, such as sickle cell disease. Races can also be identified by their characteristics in their skeleton structure. There's also differences in organ transplant compatibility. The compatibility of organ donors is also determined by race. A black requiring bone marrow transplant has higher chance of compatibility with donors of their own race. I will touch more upon this in Subject 6, Why Race Matters. There is no gene for race. There are genes for race. Race is defined by the correlation structure of a cluster of genes, alleles. There are many racial differences, and we are in the realm of probabilities and majority stagnation due to the regression to the mean. Skin color, eye shape, lips, eye socket, nose shape, body structure, muscle fibers, forehead, back of the head, backhead, hair type, eye globe, eyelid, eye coat, hair color, eye color, cranial shape, all being biological prone to be tall, short, obese, or thin, etc. The human genetic variation that is unique to the different races is the newer part that has developed since humans began their genetic division along different lines of evolution. As said in part 1, we are evolving faster now than ever before, and the fact is we're not even the same people we were 1,000 years ago, even 100 years ago. We've stayed biologically loyal and connected with the geography, and these evolutions are evolutions within racial lines. In this cover of Scientific American, 5 of these faces are computer generated, and only 1 is authentic. The other faces were made from the Caucasian one to make them look more alike. That is where science ends and ideology starts. Since race is so clearly real, the fact that people can see it for themselves, and a very clear majority of the time rightfully self-proclaim what races they are, judging by ancestors or phenotype without being taught, and that deconstruction actually is required, that people will be taught that it's not real, despite to what they see to the contrary with their very own eyes. Are the races not distinct? Do you fail to see with your own eyes the clear differences between Asians, Africans, and Europeans? Can you not tell what race you belong to? Aren't these differences created on a genetic level? Would you expect an African baby to be born to an Asian couple, or vice versa? We know now that genes are what determines our physical traits, from the pigmentation of our skin, to the physical structure, and to the structure of our brains. This was all clear to people who lived without this knowledge thousands of years ago. It's natural and undeniable, and a person must be taught relentlessly to deny this. The difference races by differences in our genes is a category that is a category below species. It is a process of divergent evolution that created all the biological diversity of life on Earth. Races are a necessary part of evolution. They are the first step in the divergence of life into distinctively different forms, species, which is the way we are heading as mentioned in part 1. Races are the mean in which different species are created.